All right, well, welcome. We're now in character outcome 3, and we're going to be looking specifically at the theological component of this one. And just so you know, my background is I got my PhD in systematic theology. And so I enjoyed this one, but I really enjoyed CO2 more because that's how you get to this one. But let me go ahead and share my screen with you and just get us oriented again uh, in terms of the character outcome and the competency and how that relates to the learning experience. As you can see, we're in the character outcome number 3, theologically relevant Christian thinker, competency 7, systematic theology. And if you go to the MA flow, this is what you're going to see. And you're really going to be in this learning experience, you're going to be looking at 4 major doctrines. And not only are you going to be looking at them, but you're actually going to be writing doctrines on the area in doctrine of God, doctrine of Christ, doctrine of humanity, but specifically as it relates to the image of God and creation. Now, when looking at Pathright and when looking at number 2, this formulate the doctrinal statements, you will see they are quite different. Pathright is going to more walk you through a traditional way of looking at systematic theology. It's very important that you do that and that you go through that, you have any discussions that you need to as a learning community or with your mentors, so that you can understand systematic theology in its broader sense, meaning that you're going to go from prolegomena, the things that get you ready to understand systematic theology, to bibliology, and then you're going to go through all the major doctrines all the way till you get to eschatology or the end times. We're not going to look at all those doctrines in terms of actually having you use the 9-step process, but we are going to look and have you do doctrinal statements on 4 of them. There are actually 5, but you've already done the Holy Spirit, so we have removed that one, and that was done earlier. So you'll be doing, using the 9-step process, you'll be doing a doctrine on God. Now, when you do a doctrine on God, that means you have to go from Genesis through Revelation. That is a huge amount of material to go through. And so it will be very important for you and your learning community to have a strategy by which you can go after the doctrine of God. So you could do that based on his attributes, which I would probably recommend, but I'll let you all figure that out. Then you're going to move from that doctrine, and they're going through the 9-step process. Then you're going to go and do a doctrine of Christ. And again, it is a massive undertaking because you have eternity past, eternity future. Christ exists in both of those. He then appears in the Old Testament, and then he comes in the Gospels, and then he is talked about, and you learn more about him in the rest of the New Testament. And then in the book of Revelation, at the end of times, he comes back to consummate all things. And finally, in the new heaven and new earth, where we move then into eternity future. So that is a very different way you're going to approach that doctrine. Then you come to the doctrine of humanity, which is again different because there are so very few verses on the doctrine of man as the image of God. But what's fascinating is when you look at that doctrine in particular, it is telling a story of God and man. And so you will look at the 10 verses that relate to man as the image of God, and you will begin to see that even though there are so few verses, that this is a very significant doctrine, and you'll have to explain why so few verses. And then finally, you go into the doctrine of creation. And the doctrine of creation is important because it will help you connect with maybe a swath of people that you otherwise may not connect with. And so it's very important that you understand the nature of the creation as you being a part of the creation, but you also being in the image of God, then having dominion over that creation, that you can deal with that in a proper manner. Then once you have done those doctrines, and again, I would emphasize doing this as a learning community and sharing the load, process over product, then you will write a 3 to 5 page paper on the implications. You can choose one of the doctrines, or you can choose multiple doctrines or all of the doctrines. And you want to begin to think through what are the implications of that doctrine, because you don't want it to just be stale, just information, but you want it to lead towards transformation into worship. And so this is helping you to do that. And then what you want to do, or what you will do, is you'll present one of those categories in your learning community. And finally, you'll teach this to somebody else outside of the learning community in your context. And it is a very important skill, this 9-step process. and you'll use these various doctrines. And then what you'll do is you'll use an outside systematic theology source to validate your actual doctrinal statement. And so my hope is that as you continue to do this, that you'll worship our amazing God and what he's done, and that you'll be better equipped to move from the scriptures to any doctrinal statement that you like. And that wraps up this part of character outcome 3. We'll now, in the next video, look at 2 other elements of character outcome 3, but we'll do those together. Thanks.